Greetings, brothers and sisters. Shalom. Assalamu alaikum. It's a privilege being back with you here on Points of Light Radio and resuming this journey again that we've begun over a year ago. In today's segment, we will be revisiting our friends and the Knights of Pythias. Just a brief recap. The Knights of Pythias was founded in Washington, D.C. on the 19th of February in 1864 by a gentleman named Justice Henry Rathbone. He was also a Freemason. Mr. Rathbone was impressed by the play by the Irish poet named John Bannum about the Greek legend of Damon and Pythias. Perhaps my guest can expand on that a little further. The order is headquartered in Stoughton, Massachusetts. The lodges meet in structures referred to as castles. And my guest for this segment of Points of Light Radio is a gentleman named Dylan John Callahan. Mr. Callahan is the Chancellor Commander of the Knights of Pythias, Damascus Lodge, number 455. Well, I believe that's enough explaining for me. Like I said, that was just a brief recap. This is going to feel like we're getting together with old friends. But are you still searching for the light? Are you still hungry for knowledge? Then just trim your lamp and follow me.
Ladies and gentlemen, seekers of light and secret knowledge wherever you may be, you are listening to Points of Light Radio, the podcast dedicated to taking you past the apron and behind the closed doors of lodges everywhere. And here is your host, Stan Miller.
Mr. Callahan. Mr. Callahan.
Yes.
Welcome.
How are you doing?
Welcome to Points of Light Radio, sir.
Thank you.
Now, you are a member of the Knights of Pythias, and I believe it's Kansas, is it?
Yes.
What lodge again? Or what castle?
It's a Damascus Lodge, number 445, Knights of Pythias of Missouri and Kansas.
Oh, Knights of Missouri and Kansas. Okay.
Yes, yes.
Now, why don't you tell my listeners and viewers a little more about yourself?
I joined the Knights of Pythias in 2019. I was very good friends with Casey Pemberton and Jordan Brizendine out of Missouri, and I've been friends with them for years, and they invited me on. I live out here in Lyon County, Kansas. It's a little bit north of Emporia. And I'd never been a member of a fraternal order before, so it was all brand new territory for me. But I've really enjoyed my time so far.
Okay. Now, and how long have you been a member?
I believe the date I joined was April 20th, 2019, so going on 4 years.
Okay. Now, I seen on your Facebook page you were what's called the Chancellor Commander of your castle. Now, what exactly is a Chancellor Commander, and what exactly do you do in that role?
The Chancellor Commander is the executive officer of the lodge, so the main role is conducting and organizing the meetings and rank work for the lodge, but it's a lot of fingers and a lot of different pies, honestly. It's just making sure everything runs smoothly for the lodge.
Okay. Now tell us about the Knights of Pythias. What have you learned about it so far?
Knights of Pythias, first of all, it's an American organization. It was founded in Washington, D.C. It's not as old as most of the classical fraternities like the Freemasons and the Oddfellows, you know. And that's something that in the old literature, such as Pythian Knighthood and Jewels of Pythian Knighthood, these are books written in the 1870s and 1880s. they'll point that out. We're not a very old fraternal order. So we don't make any pretense for being ancient or anything like that. But the principles that the Knights of Pythias espouse, namely friendship, charity, and benevolence, that's much older than our order, much older than even our society. That's coming from classical and ancient Greece and far-flung corners of the world. So the main gist behind the Knights of Pythias, as the name sort of suggests, is the classical story of Damon and Pythias, two friends who pledged their lives to each other and had that friendship tested and to the point of death. And thankfully it wound up not coming to that. Both of their lives were saved, but they proved that friendship can be so true as to the point of death.
Yeah, and I think that's wonderful when you talk about that, about getting a lot of your traditions and stuff from that Greek tradition, because they were quite rich in drama and things like that. In many of their sciences and things like that, that would be a wonderful place to draw a lot of your tradition from. I think you'll agree.
Most definitely. And that's the thing. When the order was founded by Justice Rathbone in 1864, he was inspired some 4 or 5 years prior, maybe even longer than that, by the play by John Banham, The Story of Damon and Pythias. That's what really inspired the founder of our order, was seeing that sort of friendship. And the Civil War hadn't kicked off quite by that point, but tensions were rising, certainly. And even at that early point, he was 19 years old at the time. He recognized that sort of friendship that was being espoused in that play was something that was needed in the United States at that time. So I believe it's the winter of 1858, spring of 1859, he actually wrote out the ritual long before he even founded the actual order. But he definitely wanted to see the same sort of friendship that had been enshrined in history.
And of course, historically speaking, the Greeks brought us democracy, a word that comes from there. And do you see that in the lodge, keeping everybody involved, keeping like the Greeks did? They like to.
Most definitely. And that's something that I think is going to cause the Knights of Pythias to really stand out. Is when I came into the order, I said before, it's not a very old order, but 150, 160 years old at this point. All the members of the lodge that I had joined at that time, that would be Sicilian Lodge out of Independence, Missouri. All of those members had been members for 40, 50 years.
Wow. And
they took in a young man like myself. I was 25, 26 years old at the time. They took me in and they told me, this is what you make of it, and you can do anything you want, just so long as you're espousing the principles of our order. And they very much encouraged me to do my own study, and they helped me along. I've had a lot of great mentors and really great people that I've met in the order.
I think that's very important in a lodge. I really do. The mentorship part of it.
Right.
Now, how many degrees are there?
We use it's the same thing as degrees, but we use ranks, and it's Page, Esquire, and Knight. Those are your three. Freemasons would probably call those the Blue Lodge degrees. I'm not a Freemason, but there's a lot of overlap. Beyond that, you can become a past Chancellor after having served a full term as a Chancellor Commander, which is 1 year. Then you're eligible to join a Grand Lodge, and eventually, if you're so inclined, you may become a Grand Chancellor and then receive past Grand Chancellor rank. And finally, you get to Supreme Chancellor, and after 2 years of that, you receive the Supreme Past Chancellor. There is one more that is honorary, very difficult to achieve, and that is the Golden Spur. They call it the degree of the Golden Spur. And that is the only rank, so far as I'm aware, that is the only rank that is allowed, that entitles you to be referred to as Sir. So we don't refer to ourselves as sirs unless you have that very special degree. And
now you've talked briefly about some of these things, but what exactly does the Knights of Pythias do? Do they charitable work within the community?
Oh, yes. And that's something that we actually talk about quite a lot, because that is the number one question that anybody in any such organization is going to be asked. What do you do? And the easy answer is yes, we do a lot of charity work. My local lodge here, Damascus Lodge, we have a couple of different local charities that we do holiday dinner funds for. We also have a disc golf tournament that's been very successful the past few years. But as far as what do we do that makes us the Knights of Pythias, because let's be real, any organization can run a charity drive. You can help out in your community any number of ways. But what makes us Knights of Pythias? That's the question that we often discuss. And that's the answer to that is going to be a little bit different depending on what jurisdiction you're in, which domain you're in, even your subordinate lodge, what you do. I can tell you what we do at Damascus Lodge, and that is we focus a lot on making sure that all of our members are secure and confident in themselves and in their brothers in the lodge. And that sometimes that might look like hearing somebody's got some financial problem going on. We make sure that they're making ends meet. Do you need any groceries, anything like that? That's something we've done in the past. But beyond that, we do a lot of Pythian education, the rank work that we use through Page, Esquire, Knight. It's all very rich, and there's lots of different avenues you can take with it. So we make sure that everyone understands the ritual that they've gone through or are about to go through, a lot of symbolism and important principles like friendship, charity, benevolence, and then even the less public, more personal ones.
But I love how you said that, because it begins at the lodge level. I remember people asked me in one of the fraternal organizations I belong to, they asked me what we did. And I told them about a time when one of our brethren had his house burned down. And lodges all across Canada and even parts of the United Kingdom helped raise money and help that man rebuild his family, build their life. And, you do a lot of good work, but the good works, like you just mentioned, begin in-house. Brethren and sisters looking after one another. And I think that's the big thing with fraternalism. I think you'll agree.
Beautifully said, yes.
Yeah. Now, are you, you mentioned what drew you to the KOP. What do you think still keeps you going is it just this brethren aspect of it, or?
When I first joined in the first year, what really struck me was the fact that I came in on a 3-in-1, which is more or less par for the course for most lodges. That's something that the current lodge, the lodge I founded here locally, that's something that we have chosen not to do. But even so, it struck me that they took in some kid that most of them didn't know, went through the beautiful 3-in-1 as it was, and immediately I was in. I was an equal, and they wanted to encourage me and everything. And that struck me as marvelous. So I attended meetings with my mother lodge, Sicilian Lodge out of Independence. I attended meetings for 6, 7, 8 months, and they started giving me literature. And I think it was a combination of that unconditional brotherhood, that unconditional love of a fellow Knight of Pythias, along with the literature that they gave me that really inspired me to see the potential for this order. I read in Pythian Knighthood, which was written by David Carnahan. I read about an order that was nearly 500,000 members strong. They had castle halls in every major city, presence in United States, Mexico, Canada, Britain. And it was a beautiful thing. And it was powerful and it was influential. And I saw how we don't quite have that anymore. But the way that the literature was written and the beautiful language used to describe how they had arrived at that position of influence and how they were doing so much good in the world because of it, I really wanted to see that happen again. So I've just been on fire for it ever since then. So starting with my first year, I haven't let up. It's
Now,
really good.
how long, by the way, you talk about you founded a lodge. So you chartered up a lodge?
Yes, the year after, so I became a member in April of 2019. We founded Damascus Lodge in October of 2020
Wow.
here in Emporia.
And did you get a lot of help from your parent lodge doing that and things like that?
Absolutely. It was
I love
quite
that.
vital that we had people there for the rank work because there are only 4 other lodges in the Missouri domain. Kansas is under the Missouri domain. So Missouri controls, of course, the state of Missouri, Kansas, and Arkansas. So making sure that we had people to put on all of our new members for the new lodge, we recruited here locally quite actively. We got more than enough members to start the lodge. I believe we started with 11 or 12. And we put on a few different rank works, all of them 3-in-1s. And we got our lodge founded on October 3rd, 2020. Yeah.
How long does that take to do a 3-in-1? Couple hours?
Oh, plan on 4 hours.
Okay, yeah. So are you also a member of any of the other organizations like the Dramatic Order of the Knights of Khorasan?
No, unfortunately not.
No? Are they still even around or?
Yes, I think in other jurisdictions they have a much larger presence. I'm aware of Abba Temple. I think they're connected to Sicilian Lodge. They still exist on paper, I believe.
Okay, you know any members of them though? Like, are you?
I think there's only 2 or 3 members. They don't have enough people to put on rank work at this point, unfortunately.
Well, we'll see if we can't change that.
Right? Yeah, that would be great.
And what effect did COVID have on the Knights of Pythias?
Pretty much the same effect as it had everywhere else in the world. It was really jarring, and sadly, we lost one of our mentors to COVID in 2021. If you go to the Damascus Lodge Facebook page, you can see our seal is our profile picture.
Mhm.
And that depicts Ace Vaughn, who was a major player in getting Damascus Lodge started. He was a really good friend and mentor to many members of our lodge. So when we started up, we hadn't quite designed our seal yet when unfortunately he passed. And so it was an easy choice for us to decide to put him on our seal.
Now, what's the makeup of your Pythian castle? You talked about how your parent lodge was 40 to 50 years old. What would you say the demographics are here?
I calculated this last year. I believe at this point, our median age should be 35
Good.
out of 18 members. Yep. And more on the way. We're obviously a younger lodge, and that wasn't planned. It just turned out that way. Our main recruiting method has been word of mouth. And so a lot of, like minds and like circles, like age groups. So we have a lot of 20 somethings and 30 somethings and 40 somethings.
And I was going to say about that, how do you feel that they can make something like the Knights of Pythias? How do you think you can keep it relevant in this day and age? You're fairly young yourself, right?
Yeah, that's the question of the ages, right? So something that we've talked about at the Grand Lodge level even is the question of how do you get people interested in your product? It's probably the oldest question in the world. If we had a singular answer to that, we'd be billionaires, because every company in the world, every organization in the world wants to know, how do I stay relevant and get as many people interested in what I have to offer? And so what we figure is the Knights of Pythias was one of the more successful, the big 3 in fraternal organizations.
Okay.
And they did that just by being who they were. And who we are is based in the ritual. So at Damascus Lodge, we have put a lot of work and effort into making sure that our ritual is well memorized, well performed, and all of those little bitty details and all of the great big details and every aspect of it is fully put into our members. Our greatest recruiting tool by far has been word of mouth. So when you have people who have gone through the ritual and they understand the principles of the order, like I mentioned before, there's public and there's private. When you really understand what it is, and I believe it was Bill Nye who said, when you're in love, you want to tell somebody. There is a lot of love in the Knights of Pythias ritual. And so we have a lot of people that know, oh, I know somebody from work, or my cousin, or, anybody they know that would appreciate what we have to offer to our members, and then also to those outside of our order. That's how we bring people in. So
this is part of it too, right?
I beg your pardon?
This is part of it too, right? Like, we're sitting here talking, we're going to, this and podcasting and stuff like that. This is part of it. Getting out there, getting your message out there via something like this, modern times. I mean, the history is a great set point and stuff, but like, you need to make use of technology such as this. Or I love what you're doing as well. You've got your Facebook page, right? A lot of the fraternities I try to get together with, they don't monitor their Facebook page. It hasn't been updated since 2015, things like that. It's great to have stuff like this and have members, shall we say, if anything, to have a member that can manage your social media, get information on that, keep it updated, keep people informed about what you're doing, that you're actually out there, right? I think you'll agree.
100% agreed. You got to maintain a presence, or else you won't have one.
Yeah, exactly. And like you talked about, actually bringing people in and making them feel welcome when they do walk in that door. And I have been in lodges that aren't friendly before in my time in fraternalism. I mean, important to make people feel welcome, make them feel that warmth of, you're in that room together, and we're part of this wonderful journey together.
Absolutely vital.
So what exactly has being in the Knights of Pythias done for you?
That's a good one. I actually learned the greatest definition of friendship from the Knights of Pythias. I didn't realize I didn't know what true friendship was before I joined. And I would say, I'm not talking about anybody any relationship I had previously. I'm talking about myself. I didn't know how to be the best friend I could be before I joined the Knights of Pythias. Something that's impressed upon you is, the story of Damon and Pythias, it's friendship to the point of death. Something that's impressed on you is it doesn't have to be like that. It doesn't have to be I will give my life for you, or I'm not your best friend ever. It's not that extreme. It is something like living your life as the best friend you can be be good people with good people.
I'll be there for you. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Being there for others is the biggest and most life impactful thing that I've learned.
And what would you say to someone who was thinking about joining the Knights of Pythias?
I would definitely encourage it, and I would tell them my experiences, and I would let them know it doesn't matter where you are in the world. If you know another Knight of Pythias, they will be there for you in some way or other, any way they can.
Well, Mr. Callahan, I appreciate you taking the time to be with us today, and all the best to you and the Damascus Lodge.
Thank you very much. It's been great. Thank you.
Best you, sir. Bill and Callahan, brothers and sisters. Wasn't it great revisiting the Knights of Pythias? We've covered them before, at least twice. And I would encourage you actually to go back and look at those segments, because if it shows anything, it shows that fraternalism is alive and it's well and it's growing, okay, in some areas, right? Right now, my guest today, Mr. Callahan, actually did put forward some fresh thinking and new ideas about how to make fraternalism in these different orders relevant. He's actually, and the reason we can say that they work is because some of my previous guests have talked about the same thing, right? And these not just with the Knights of Pythias, but with other fraternal orders, right? These methods work. Things like the idea of making new members of your lodge feel welcomed, the idea of having a strong online presence, with your social media accounts and so on, things like that, word of mouth, not hiding your light under a bushel type thing, spreading the word about the order you belong to. These work, right? And it was wonderful having Mr. Callahan on here. Like I said, you can see just by talking to him that fraternalism's alive and well, right? This was Mr. Callahan was a man right off the street, had never been involved in fraternalism before, and he came in, and not only did he get involved and help his lodge out, he actually chartered another lodge, right? And that's great. That's wonderful to hear that. It really is, right? And right, we'll definitely, as I keep saying, we'll try to revisit the Knights of Pythias. And I keep saying this: if you're in the Knights of Dramatic Order, of Khorasan, I encourage you to reach out to me, and we'll have your organization on here. And did I mention any of the other ones? Did I mention the one that you might be involved in? Right? If I haven't featured your lodge here or your organization on Points of Light Radio, maybe it's because you need to reach out to me or nudge the leadership of your organization in my direction, right? But that's all I have time for today. Before I go, I want to remind you that this podcast is available on both YouTube and Spreaker. Please share, like, and subscribe when viewing Points of Light Radio on YouTube. You can follow Points of Light Radio on my Facebook page at facebook.com/Points of Light Radio. You can see the link to my Twitter handle and Spotify channel here on the details section of this podcast. But, brothers and sisters, I'm sorry to part with you, but until we meet again, just step into the light.